Here we are in Prague in the Czech Republic. Right there behind me is the famous Prague Castle. Today we're going to talk about urbanization and we're going to look at European cities, and Prague as an example. I'm Mr. Coulter and this is Human Geography. Today we move on to topic 2 of Unit 6, urbanization, and topic 6.2 is cities around the world. So we need to learn exactly what is a city and what does it mean to be a city. So we'll start with the legal definition of a city. A city is an urban settlement that has been legally incorporated into an independent, self-governing unit. That means that they can elect officials, raise taxes, and are responsible for providing essential services to the people of the city. A central city is a city that is surrounded by suburbs. So for our area, Atlanta would be the central city for where we're located in Alpharetta or Milton, Georgia. So the characteristics of a modern city. There are a lot of things we need to know about what makes a modern city special. One is the large size. So in rural areas, you typically know your neighbors. You know who lives there because it's a smaller population. You might even be related to a lot of them. In urban areas, you only know a small percentage of the other inhabitants. So there are a lot of people in large urban areas, and you'll probably only know a small percentage of them. The second characteristic is high density. The only way for large numbers of people to survive in that small of an area is specialization. That means that different people need to do different types of jobs to help the city function together. And they play a special role in making sure that all the people can fit comfortably in a space. That also causes people to compete for limited space. So if you think about the prices of apartments in cities are much higher than if you went to like a rural college town, for example. And the specialization allows people to keep streets clean, to keep people fed, doctors, all of the things that go into that. And that ties into specialized jobs. We need all the different types of jobs, from engineers to architects, people who actually build the buildings, medical professionals to keep people safe and healthy, chefs and restaurant workers to feed, and then trash and sanitation to make sure our cities stay clean and functioning. Cities also have social heterogeneity, which means in a larger settlement there's a greater variety of people. Urban areas provide for more freedom to pursue an unusual profession, like acting or art you can only find in certain places. Sexual orientation or cultural interests are typically varied in cities. Urban residents are typically more tolerant of diverse social behavior. In an urbanized area, a central city and its contiguous built-up suburbs where the population exceeds 1,000 people per square mile means an urbanized area. About 70% of the United States population, and that number is growing, live in what we think of as urban areas. That's divided equally between the central city and surrounding suburbs. So that means that of the US's 340 million people, 70% live in urban areas. We see Zurich here is a highly specialized urban area with a lot of advanced technology. So those are the characteristics of a modern city. So those are the things that make a city unique to rural areas. But let's get further into our definition of what makes a city a city. So the metropolitan statistical area is typically what people envision when they think of cities. The MSA, the metropolitan statistical area, includes the following things: a central city with a population of at least 50,000 people, the county which the city is located, and then the adjacent counties with a high population density and a large percentage of the residents working in the central city's county. So that includes 3 things. It is the central city with 50,000 people at least, the county that the city is located in, and then the counties that are around it that have 1,000 people per square mile, and a large percentage of the people who live in those counties work in the central city. So let's look at Atlanta metro area to understand this a little bit better. So this is the metropolitan statistical area of Atlanta. As you can see, Fulton County and DeKalb are where we generally see the city take root in the middle of 285 in that circle in the middle. As you move out from it, you have the rest of those two counties. Then it includes Clayton County and all of the counties where people commute into Atlanta for work. If you look at this area, it is actually a 2-hour drive from the top of Howell County all the way down to Coweta. And that shows that the statistical metropolitan area is a very large space in a suburb like Atlanta. Sometimes we see situations where these metropolitan statistical areas blend in with other cities. So where one city's suburbs end and the others start at the same place. This is known as a megalopolis. It's a conurbation. Conurbation means multiple cities blended together. Of a number of cities blended together without separation. So where the suburbs overlap each other. They call this the blob. Lewis Mumford coined that term. And the most famous megalopolis is Bosnia-Wash. Those are the areas of New York, D.C., and Boston. It is a large complex of cities. A county between two central cities may send commuters in either direction. So you might have some neighborhoods in Philadelphia and New York suburbs where some people work in Philly and some people work in New York, and that makes sense because it's between the two. If you look from Richmond, Virginia on the southwest part of the map, all the way up to Portland, Maine, that is a part of one megalopolis. That is Bosnia-Wash, and it includes Philadelphia, Boston, New York, Hartford, Connecticut, Washington, D.C., and many of the cities in New Jersey. It's amazing how far the spread is where we see these overlapping suburbs. And as we look, we can see the U.S. megapolitan areas, like we talked about Bosnia-Wash in the Northeast, around the Great Lakes, Atlanta to Charlotte, and then the Gulf Coast, Florida, the Southwest Pacific, American Southwest, Northern California, and then the Pacific Northwest are all overlapping suburban areas. And then we also see a heat map of Bosnia-Wash with population, the most populated area of our country. So those are the U.S. megapolitan areas. We have seen people start to leave cities since World War II. Through all of the industrialization, people have been flocking to cities in developed countries, and now we're starting to see a reverse trend. For a variety of reasons that we'll talk about as the unit moves on, people are moving out of big cities in order to search for bigger houses and cheaper land. This movement of people from urban areas to suburban areas is known as suburbanization. It's the movement from dense cities into the surrounding suburbs. Reasons for this are the invention of the automobile allowed people to commute into the big city with their own transportation. They also sought the resources and the spread of having more land in less crowded areas. This leads to something known as sprawl. Sprawl is the expansion of development out of cities that take over surrounding green spaces. We talked about this in Unit 5 where we're losing farmland to this suburban sprawl and the way that cities spill out into the farmland around. So we see more and more developed areas. A great example of this is if you've ever hiked to the top of Sawney Mountain and looked out at the view, that is already very far out in the suburbs, up 400, and it allows you to see that the suburbs continue even further beyond the mountain in the landscape. So we see this urban sprawl take over our rural areas. And it's also led to a decentralization of space, where people in urban areas are less dense and the populations are moving out of the central business district of a city. That creates new types of suburbs and challenges that go with those. The first is something known as an edge city. These are large concentrations of shopping, business, and entertainment that exist outside of the central business district. So if we're thinking of Atlanta and we're looking at the central business district as the area around downtown and midtown where Centennial Park and a lot of the big office buildings are, these edge cities that have moved out are things like Buckhead, Perimeter Center by Perimeter Mall, where the King and Queen building are, Johns Creek Tech Park, are all examples of edge cities. We also see something spring out known as exurbs. Those are on the fringe of the suburbs and rural areas. So those are the much further out suburbs where people are trying to get away from even the suburban life. They want to be closer to the rural areas. They still commute to the main city, but they are towns that spring up where they're trying to have a rural lifestyle while also working in a main city. And an example around Atlanta would be counties like Dawson and Pickens are north of Atlanta, and those suburbs are examples of exurbs, where people are trying to get a rural lifestyle. And finally, boom burbs are suburban cities that have exploded in size outside of the city center. So these are cities that are based around a larger central city, but then the population has exploded, and we see that lots of people live there. Arlington is a great example of this outside of Dallas. It is a Dallas suburb that has 400,000 residents. That's as many as live in the city of Atlanta. We see here Perimeter Center is an example of an edge city. That's the Sandy Springs Dunwoody area where Perimeter Mall is. Right here we can see all of the different exurbs of Atlanta. Atlanta is in that center area where Fulton and DeKalb meet. And all of those exurbs are starred where people have the borderline rural lifestyle with working in Atlanta. And then Arlington, Texas, which is home of the Dallas Cowboys and the Texas Rangers, are in a boomburg of Dallas, which is Arlington. And all of these things come as a result of where people wanted to move. So we see on the left urbanization happening in 1900, but then this counter-urbanization where people move to the suburbs that we call suburbanization has led to the springing up of this decentralization. And urban sprawl spreads out into the countryside from central cities. We learned about a lot in topic 6.2, cities around the world. We talked about the legal definitions of a city and a metropolitan statistical area, and we also talked about what made cities unique. We also see that in the developed world, people are moving out of cities in a movement called suburbanization, and urban sprawl is moving out to take over the surrounding areas. This is just one step into better understanding our world. I'm Mr. Coulter, and this was Human Geography.